Good morning and welcome to Blixx All About Horses and Their Care, where our motto is companionship, care, and commitment. I'm your host, Gabriela Rodriguez, and today our show is actually a series called In Your Horse's Best Interest. And part one is called Bitted or Bitless. Now, that has been quite a controversial subject in the horse world, bitted or bitless, but it's only been within the last couple of decades that people have really made strides to invent something different that doesn't hurt a horse when the horse is being ridden. Because part of the beauty that we see in horses when they're free and they're running is that beauty that sometimes you don't see when there's a rider on the horse, because the rider is restraining and controlling the horse. We want to have communication. We want to be able to have a fluid relationship. Relationship is very key with horses, but we don't want the horse to get hurt just because we want to have ride or because we want to perform. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about, you see a lot of things here on my display table. We're going to talk about this in layman's terms because we have a lot of viewers that are not horse people, but they're familiar with horses a little bit or maybe have ridden. But the majority of people, since there's only about 8% of people in the United States at least that have these horses or are around horses, most people don't know what it is. But I found that in the presentations that we do when we take our horses out into the public, to different venues, to seniors, to children, and the programs that we do, people are really interested in the mechanics of a horse, in the frailty of a horse, in the sports that a horse does, and of course they are just captivated because they are so beautiful. Layman's terms, bitted. Bitted basically means just what it says. Bitted means that you put something in that horse's mouth in order to control that horse. And we have a few things right here. They look a little bit cumbersome, a little bit archaic. Actually, bits have been around since BC, before Christ. That's a long time. And things haven't really changed that much. We have many, many, many bits. A lot of people have 20, 30 bits in their repertoire that they've used over the years trying to change, trying to make things better, trying to help the horse communicate better with them. Whereas perhaps one of the things they didn't consider was to allow the horse the freedom of his head and the freedom not to feel any pain in order to communicate more fully. So bitted again, this is what it means. You have something inside your mouth. I'm going to show you these pieces in just a moment. But basically, the bit goes in the mouth, and we do a lot of things with my programs and with my horses called Let's Pretend. And it's hard not to pretend or not to understand if you understand mammals and you understand that human beings are mammals, horses are mammals, dogs, cats, we're all mammals, so we have some similarities. I am a dental hygienist, that is my background, so I know the oral cavity quite well. And I have to tell you that the oral cavity, the mouth, the skull, all of those things in the horse are not very different from a human. So if you can understand how you would feel with something in your mouth, if you were, say, running or performing some athletic event and had that restraint or that feel in your mouth, it might make it a little bit harder to do. Horses have what horse people call, in horse language, the bars, where there are no teeth. And if you can look closely here, this is the space. But let me tell you I will tell you what that is in just a minute. But it's no different than what we have when we're missing teeth. It's an interdental space. So the horse people call it the bars. It's an interdental space in dentistry. So we have bitted with all these bits, and I'm going to show you some more soon, or bitless. And the thing that I want to say about bitless is it's very important. I've run into people over the years that say, oh yes, I ride with a bitless bridle. But there's a lot of confusion over what that is. In fact, bitless bridles, there's many kinds. There's a rope halter, there's a bosal or a bosel. There are many, many different things. And we're going to show you those in a minute. But one thing that I want to make clear, to say that all bitless bridles are the same or there's only one bitless bridle is like saying there's only one type of horse therapy. And most people think of therapeutic riding as horse therapy, whereas there are many horse therapies that really work with the horse's calm energy that in turn help people and in turn help horses. So horse therapy, there are many different definitions of that, not just therapeutic riding. Same with a bitless bridle. So, horse behavior and riding, I want to talk a little bit about that, because if you don't understand that, then it's going to be difficult or more difficult for you to understand how horses function and how horses think. Horses are prey animals as opposed to predators, so their instinct basically is to run, and they do a really good job of that. They run, and they run as fast as they can to get away from fear, they get away from pain, and when they're trying to get away from pain, sometimes people have a problem because if they're in the saddle and they're riding their horse, say they're very inexperienced and they're pulling back on that bit that's in that horse's mouth and the horse isn't stopping, well, it's not bad behavior. The horse isn't stopping, and you probably guessed it, because the horse is in pain. The only way that they know to get away from the pain is to keep running. So you see that kind of thing happen a lot, and of course there are accidents to boot and also people falling off, and unfortunately what happens then is the horse gets sold and the trainer finds another. Now, before I go on, I want to say one other thing. I'm not talking about the small percentage of people that ride with bits that have incredible hands, because to say they have soft hands is an understatement. I have soft hands. I'm very gentle. I'm very gentle with my horses. But if I'm riding in a gallop or a canter or a faster gait, if I get startled or I get fearful, which happens, I have a tendency to pull back. Everybody does. As mammals, that's what we do. As human beings, that's what we do. Our fear kicks in, we pull back. And attached to the horse's mouth are reins, which let's see if I brought some reins. I did not bring some reins. Next time we're going to bring some reins. But attached to these headstalls, this is what actually goes on the head, are reins. And most people know what reins are. But when you're riding a horse and you're pulling back and the horse isn't stopping, if you pull back in fear, your hands are attached to the reins, which are attached to the mouthpiece, and you're hurting the horse's mouth. So there is a small percentage of people that can do this. I have friends that use bits, and I give them a huge amount of credit, because it takes an incredible amount of skill to do that. But for the majority of people, 90 to 99% of the riders out there that ride on the weekends, ride for 3 or 4 hours on the weekends, don't ride during the winter because of the snow, start again in the summer, compete during the summer, ride on the weekends, that's not us. So, horse behavior, they're prey animals. Unfortunately, they're also bought and sold quite a bit. That tends to be horse tradition, which we at Blixx Horses are trying to break. But whenever a horse is sold to another owner, that horse is confused. We get a new bit, we get a new barn, we get a new trainer. We left our buddies at the last barn. We have new buddies or we're alone. We have a new bit, we have a new way, we have a new sport. Everything's new, and that poor horse has to get accustomed to all of that. And people are very quick sometimes to say, well, that's just a bad horse, or it's bad behavior, or, the trainer. There are a lot of good trainers. I'm not saying that all trainers are bad trainers, but a lot of trainers are ready to sell you your next horse if something doesn't work out with the horse that you have. Riding, dressage is the highest level of training, where there is such quiet communication and such subtle communication that you don't see it. Dressage riders, for people that don't know, generally have very spiffy outfits. They have the tailcoats, they have the top hats. They look very, very beautiful, but when you look closely and look at their horses, sometimes their horses look like they're struggling. Also, dressage, the sport of dressage, is incredible. I have a background in dance and ballet. A lot of those movements were copied from ballet. The piafs, all of that. So we have these horses on 4 legs doing these movements. Then we have something in their mouth restricting their movement. It's very, very tough on them. So with riding, there should be no interference. When you see a horse galloping or running, and you appreciate how beautiful they look, when you put that rider on top of the horse, it should look just as beautiful. There should be no interference. But unfortunately, most of the time, that's what we see. A little bit of anatomy and physiology. These actually have not been treated. This is a skull. This is a skull. Two different horses. It's pretty obvious. This is the top part of the skull. Very fragile. It's quite old. And like I said, it has not been treated, but it's been out in the elements and the heat and the cold for years, so I'm not afraid to touch it. This was a little horse, a little mini horse probably, maybe a little pony, I don't think so. I'm not sure. But it was a horse at one point, a real horse. And the top part is like the maxilla of our mouth. The maxilla is the top jaw. We have the top jaw, the skull, and maybe next time I'll see if I can bring in a skull so we can make those comparisons. But what I'm trying to say, the point I'm trying to illustrate is that it's all the same. Looks a little bit different, it's a bit longer, but here are where the nasal passages are, okay? And you turn it around, you can see underneath, there are the teeth, there's the inner dental space, or the bars, as horse people call them. There are the remaining teeth. Then we have the hard palate here. We have a hard palate, they have a hard palate. Beyond that is the soft palate. Very similar to people, it's a little bit longer, they're different functions. But the teeth are in the gum. The gum tissue is over bone. So this is bone, this is where a metal bit lays. So whether it's a bit like this that lays on top of the bone, on top of the gum, and it's pulled back, and interferes with a horse, it rests there. And there are many bits. I thought I had brought a regular snaffle bit, but I didn't. They're a lot heavier. They hurt. You know, we want to say that they apply pressure. What's the definition of pressure? A little pressure, a lot of pressure. How does it feel when you have pressure? A lot of us have felt the pressure in our mouths, through orthodontics, through dental treatments. We know what pressure feels like. But how can it be good for that horse to feel so much pressure when they're being ridden and supposed to ride freely? I'm going to put this back. And of course the skull, the one thing I didn't say that most people know is it houses the brain. And over here would be where the poll is. The poll is a very sensitive area. That's where the bridle comes down. This goes on the forehead, layman's terms. This is on top of the head. This is the bit, and this is the noseband here. This is all leather, but if you put and use that pressure on top of bone, you're going to feel it. So I'm just asking you to think about what it would feel like if you had that type of situation. How easy would it be for you to be able to move? Because again, it's all the same. Here is another, the bottom part of a skull. And unfortunately, I know a little bit about this little horse. It was a little quarter horse. His name was Leo. Leo had a very short life. Leo went to a couple of different barns. I think he started being ridden about 2, a little young. He was a, quote, show horse. As a show horse, you take them to special trainers, you have special things done. If they don't behave, then you push them more and push them more. Not with every philosophy, but this is what happened to him. At 5 years old, 5 or 6, his owner was very frustrated. He wouldn't do what she wanted him to do. She wanted to get dressed up, and part of all this horse stuff is that getting dressed up is a lot of fun. We have our clothes, we have our little jackets, our little pants, our boots. It all looks really great. But sometimes people get caught up in the fantasy. They start to ride, they forget about the horse. And when you remember that skin is skin and the horses feel everything just like we do, they feel everything in their mouth too. So again, here we go. Here are the teeth. This is where the bit goes. And underneath the teeth, we have gum. Underneath the gum, there's bone. Then we have the tongue and the floor of the mouth, similar to us. And on the outside, of course, there are the lips. A lot of bits work by pinching the corners of the mouth. So that was even hard for me to say, because how would it feel for you to have your lips pinched and then feel all kinds of other pressures as well around your head while you're trying to perform? So I brought these in so people could see that it all is very similar, and the next time that you see a horse, you can understand that this is really what it's all about. So what I'm going to do next is show a video in just a minute, but I want to talk a little bit first about the person who produced this video. His name is Arno Hendricks. He's from the Netherlands, and you can check him out on Facebook. I spoke with Arno, and Arno had quite an epiphany the way I did. I use Dr. Cook's Bitless Bridle. It's the best thing that I've ever found, but he is a journalist by profession. So he understands a lot of the things that maybe most lay people would not. He was able to produce this wonderful video. It does show only one kind of bit. There are some graphics, but the point is there to illustrate what happens when you use this particular bit in the mouth. You can find him on Facebook. He has a sport that he loves and very devoted to called horseback archery, and he does it the way it should be done, with no hands. And that is superb because he's an excellent equestrian. And the only riding program that we have at Blixx Horses, people have to use the bitless bridle. They cannot use a bit. They learn with a bitless bridle. They have to learn to ride a horse bareback, without arms, without stirrups, all a little bit of a time, because that is where you get your balance, that's where you get your confidence, and that's where you become a good rider. So I think we're going to see the video in just a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds, and I want you to pay attention to the structures of the mouth again, because those structures are the structures that we have in our mouth. And then when we come back from the video, we're going to talk a little bit about bits. I've got some bits that I want to show. And we're going to talk about Dr. Cook's Bitless Bridle. So.
Before I get into the details, I want to explain why I'm telling this story. There is a lot to be changed in the world of horses. Horses don't have enough freedom of movement, don't get the nutrition they need, and they suffer a great deal of unnecessary pain from bits. I believe that many mistakes are made because people don't realize the impact of their actions. By explaining this as clearly as possible, I hope we can improve the welfare of horses. I'll start with the bit problem, as this is easiest to address. Because the bit lies in the cavity of the mouth, it's out of sight. Regrettably, it's also, to a large degree, out of mind. People don't give enough thought to what a bit does in the mouth of a horse. I still remember a riding lesson I had years ago. It was on a very forward horse. I had to rein him in so hard all the time that I could scarcely move my fingers when the lesson was over. So much did it hurt. I didn't think for a moment about what the poor horse must have felt, despite his attempt to tell me. Similar situations arise so often that we give them no thought. For example, bitted horses often open their mouths. They have a good reason to do this, but to understand why, we have to know what's going on inside the mouth. With a model of a skull, we can illustrate what a bit does. To understand why the horse opens his mouth, all we have to do is ask ourselves, what would happen if he does not open his mouth? Because of the hinge effect of a jointed snaffle, when tented up by traction on the reins, the joint will hit the roof of the mouth. By opening his mouth, the horse can avoid this happening a second time. But there are also other ways to escape from the pain. In order to explain, I'll use the chair example. We've all sat on chairs like this one. The manufacturer had a great sense of design, but not of comfort. This chair hurts your back. On chairs like these, you can't sit back for more than 1 minute. You have to wriggle about all the time. You first lean on one shoulder, then the other one. Then you lean on a spine. Why do you do this? You do it to limit the pain by constantly changing its location. It would hurt even more if you didn't shift about. Horses feel the threat of the bit against their pellets all the time. They cannot distribute the pain, but they can put something, their tongue, between the bit and the pellets in the hope of lessening the pain. Sadly, even this strategy is not entirely successful, as the tongue is one of the most sensitive organs in the body. You often hear riders complain that their horse puts his tongue over the bit. This problem can be solved immediately by removing the bit. Unfortunately, few riders reach this conclusion. Instead, the market responds incorrectly by offering various tools that supposedly solve the problem, but which only mask the symptoms and do nothing to remove the cause. I will not list all the devices, but I'll take the spoon sniffle as an example. With such a bit, a horse cannot put his tongue over the bit, but it does not stop the pain. The double broken snaffle doesn't hurt the palate, like the single broken snaffle does, but it can still hurt the lower jaw. Not many people know that the bars of the mouth on which the bit presses are as sharp as a knife edge. When the rider pulls the reins, the bit is pressed against the gum over this knife edge. With a single broken snaffle, it's no different. Not all horses have the same size of tongue. Usually, the tongue is wide enough to spread like a blanket over the bars of the mouth and cover them. That can make it even worse, because the tongue is now pinched between the bit and the knife edges. By opening the mouth, the tongue is given more freedom to move, and the horse will strive to lift the bit off the bars using his tongue. But this now results in constant movement and deprives the rider of steady contact. The rider now applies greater pressure on the reins. The horse, in turn, responds by opening his mouth even wider or putting his chin on his chest. Most riders notice something's wrong if a horse opens his mouth, but rather than find out why, the horse is literally silenced with a tight noseband, and the problem is considered solved. But the reason the horse opened his mouth was pain, and the pain is still there. The horse no longer opens his mouth because he can't. It's a sad irony that many of us dream of being able to speak with our horses. But when the horse tries to tell us he is in pain, we silence him with nosebands.
So as you can tell from that video, and I hope too many of you weren't too traumatized by it, but it is traumatic to see what happens with a horse when you're trying to ride a horse and you end up hurting a horse by riding the horse. I could not have done a better job in producing a video than he did. And he said everything probably that I didn't. But the other thing that I want to add, as most of you know, the horse's mouth, our mouths, are some of the most sensitive parts of our body. So to inflict that type of, quote, pressure, which can be seen as pain and probably very well is pain, isn't fair to do to the horse. And so that's why it's particularly harmful or bad to put bits in children's hands and put them on top of the horse and let them manipulate the horse's mouth that way. Similarly, it's not good to put a bit in the hands of an inexperienced rider, like I used to be. And the trainers would always say, well, if this bit doesn't work, let's bit up. It's always let's bit up, let's get a stronger bit, a harsher bit, because if they're not listening, this will make them listen. The only thing that I want to add is that underneath the gums, in horses as well as in us, it's loaded with nerves. So when you put a bit, and here is a bit similar to the one that he used in the video. It has this action, and it has a lot of movable parts so that they can interfere with the horse's mouth, the corners of the mouth, the pinches. They push the tongue down. Now, can you imagine what it would be like? And when you've been to the dentist or to the doctor and they look at your throat and then they push your tongue down a little bit, you understand how that feels, so you can imagine how this might feel. But the face, like in us, the skull, in horses, it's very highly vascular, a lot of blood vessels, and highly innervated. So there are nerves everywhere. Okay, what I want to talk about now are the bits. Basically, they're made out of metal. Most of them still are. We do have people that came up. Everybody tries to come up with something a little better, and I have to give them a huge amount of credit for trying. This is plastic coated. So now we have plastic on top of the gums, which still interferes, but at least it's not metal. There are all kinds of bits, and some of the bits have really cute names, like egg butt bit. There's a lot of different ones. So sometimes people get influenced by the name of something or how that bit worked with somebody else or with another horse than by doing the research. And that's why we have this television program, so you can be better educated and informed so you know what to do, what the best thing is for your horse, and do just a little bit better. So here is a straight bit. I believe this is a racing bit. To be honest with you, I'm not quite sure, but I believe it is a racing bit. Same thing, it pushes down on the tongue, and it has the effect of hurting the horse. This works on the leverage system the way Arno was explaining, so you can put the reins through here, or you can put the reins through here, and that will make it perform in a different way, but still you're interfering with that horse's mouth. And I brought this just for fun. It's actually a little keychain. Most horse people out there have probably seen these. I still have the tag, the price tag on it. But we use it in our Let's Pretend. I don't have anybody put them in their mouths. But if you look at this little bit and you think about your mouth and you think about how it would feel to have a simple snaffle in there, then you know what a horse probably feels when he's being asked to perform or to run, or when he's being asked to stop and he can't because of the pain. So basically, bits are categorized into two categories, basically. There's a lot of specifics in this, but there's snaffles and there's curbs. They both work differently. The curbs work on leverage, the snaffles don't. And then we have bits called gag bits that do exactly that, pelham bits, and then we have double bridles. You see that a lot in dressage and in saddle seat. And when I was looking through my library of books, I, like many horse people, have so many books, and I'm glad that I kept them all. They all served a purpose, they all helped. But this is a book called Bits and Saddles by Jessica Jehiel, which is a wonderful book. And in this book, she explains how bits work and all the types of bits that there are. It's very simple, good command of the language so that people can actually understand it, because usually when you talk to horse people, you don't understand what they're saying, particularly trainers, because they're talking in horse terms or the horse world terms, not layman's terms. So there really isn't any mystery about riding. There's no mystery about horses. But you have to understand why, and you have to do your research and read. But even Jessica Jahil, in her book, she talks about pressure. She uses the word torture when those bits or those reins are in the wrong hands. Whose hands are wrong? Well, the majority of us. It's very, very hard to ride a horse. The best way to learn to ride a horse is to let that horse go freely and to learn how to center yourself, how to balance yourself, and like I said, riding bareback, doing all those things that are very laborious but will give you that seat and that confidence so that you don't hurt your horse. And it can be a whole lot of fun. You can go to the beach, you can have the fantasy, you can go to the show. I used to show and I used to compete. I used to really love it because I'm a very competitive person. But I would not hurt my horse for the sake of the show. And if the show did not allow the bitless bridle, I would not enter the competition. So in looking through all my books, I found, I don't know if anybody is familiar with this book, A Whole Bit Better by the Myler brothers, who invented the Myler bits. And in looking through the bits, or through the book, which is probably about 15 years old, because at the point that I got my horse, I knew that I didn't want to continue to cause the horse pain. And I was an inexperienced rider on top of it, so it was a really bad situation. But when I found this book, I also found a letter that I sent to the Myler Bit Company because I had gone to a special clinic that I had paid quite a bit of money for to get my horse put on the correct bit. Tested for what he needed, and he was supposed to get the right bit. Then you go home. I think this happens to a lot of people. You go home, you don't know what to do. Nobody in the barn knows because they never heard of those Myler bits. Everybody uses something else, so they warn you about all the things that they're not good for. But the fact of the matter is that I didn't have a whole lot of luck. I was very frustrated. I didn't want to ride anymore because, or at least I didn't want to use that bit. So consequently, I wrote the letter, never heard anything, which was very sad, and I think it happens to people sometimes, not that they don't have a great customer service department, but it didn't happen with me. I pleaded for someone to please help me with this bit, that it wasn't working. And I got no results. So I changed bits, and guess what? I confused my horse again, started playing around with something else that was in his mouth, and until I got Dr. Cook's bridle. That was one of the biggest days, the most important days in my life and my horse's life. So along with A Whole Bit Better and the book by Jessica Jahil, we have Horse and Rider. And, you know, when you look at all of this, these are all wonderful books, but when you look at all of this and you think about the beautiful Lipizzan honor stallions, why is it that the Lipizzan honor stallions need all of that hardware in their mouths in order to have that effect and to be able to move freely and to do these very intricate movements that they do? They could probably be done with a bitless bridle. But a lot of what happens with horses is tradition. Unfortunately, a lot of traditions with horses are not good for the horse. And then in my research for my books, I found my old Anatomy of Orofacial Structures that I had in college. And this is a human book on teeth and on the skull. Okay, so now that you've seen all of this, you can understand why people have these fantasies, the bucket lists. I want to ride a horse on the beach. They don't think about what that means. But anybody out there, any number of people out there will readily take your money, put you on a horse, and you'll never know what's in their mouth to make sure that that horse doesn't run away from you and that you have a safe ride. It can be done in a better way, but it takes time. I remember a trainer, very good rider, but she was also a trainer, tried my bitless bridle, and she tried it for a day, and then she said it didn't work. You cannot try anything for a day. Relationships can't be developed in a day. It takes months, sometimes years, to develop a relationship with your horse. You have to be in there for the long haul. You can't just get a horse so that you can go to a show or get into a competition. It's an animal. It's not a car. I know a lot of trainers out there like to compare them to cars, and I even heard one trainer once say, you know, sometimes you just have to upgrade. You get rid of that horse, upgrade to a better horse. And she said that in front of children, very lack of respect for animals, and that teaches people the wrong thing, because horses are not cars and they're not mechanical. So what I'd like to do now is see some pictures that I brought. There's just a few. They're not the best, but it's going to show or illustrate, hopefully, what I'm talking about, what you should be able to see as far as what horses look like when they're not happy. And so the next picture, I think, shows the innervations on the skull, full of blood vessels, full of nerve endings, and this is where we put all this hardware, and then to boot, we put something inside their mouths. The next picture is actually very sad, and if you're out there looking at this picture, it shouldn't take a whole lot for your instinct to kick in and say, geez, you know, this horse doesn't look very happy. Look at his mouth. This is a little racehorse probably going into the blocks, or into the box. He's scared. He's a young horse. He's frightened. You can see the look in his eyes. When people get frightened, their eyes are big. When horses get frightened, their eyes are big. People sometimes like horses with big eyes because they look very dramatic. But what we do with horses is totally against drama. We want subtlety. The mouth is open, and what was really interesting to me is to see that tiny little hand on that lead rope that's attached to the inside of his mouth. What is he going to do? If he rebels or if he gets upset, he's going to get punished. And of course, there's a rider on his back too. So he's got a whole lot of things going on with interfering with him and with his mouth. The next picture is a horse, what a horse should look like, and this horse has a bitless bridle on. This one, but you can see the look in his eyes, the look in his ears. The bitless bridle is nice because you can also use it as a regular halter. So you don't have to change into a halter once you ride. But there he is with the bitless bridle. You can see the difference in the expressions, and that's what I want you to look at, the expressions, the eyes, the mouth. The mouth is closed. Horses do not breathe through their mouths. So sometimes people see their mouths open when they're running, and they think that they're breathing like we do, but they are incapable of breathing through their mouths. They only breathe through their nose. So the reason that mouth is open is because of pain. The next slide. This horse doesn't look too unhappy. He looks very calm. His head is down. He's relaxed. The other thing about horses, people like the very dramatic look of horses' eyes being very big and their neck being straight up and their ears perked up because they think that looks pretty. This would probably be boring to some people, but this is what a horse should look like. Very comfortable. The nose band is on correctly. The pole right in between the back of the ears, that's where the crown of the bitless and every bridle connects. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's the expression that your horse should have. Now, certainly if your horse is running, the eyes are going to be open. He's resting, but he shouldn't look alarmed. Next picture. There's a comparison. And again, we all have instincts. Usually, if your instinct says something doesn't look right, you're probably right. Next picture shows, again, another bitless bridle. Again, the horses are not running, but their expressions aren't that different from the way they are now when they are running, because they're happy, nothing's interfering with their mouth, and nothing's hurting them. So we have if you go back to that, the white horse has the bitless bridle, Dr. Cook's bitless bridle, the cross under, and then another type of bitless bridle called the rope halter, which is a little stronger, actually a lot stronger, because it has knots that push against the sensitive areas of the head. And the little brown horse there is in a rope halter. Okay, and the next picture, not the best picture, I'll bring another one, but I just wanted everyone to see what it kind of looked like when a horse yawns, how big that mouth is. So now we have what Arno was talking about, when some people, it's not enough that they've got the bit in the horse's mouth, the horse isn't cooperating, so then they take straps of leather and they strap that mouth shut. How uncomfortable can that be? If you're going for a 2, 3, 4-hour trail ride and you've got your horse strapped in like that, it's got to be very uncomfortable. That's the point I'm trying to drive home. So they need to be able to be comfortable in order to do what you want them to do. And certainly in competition, the horse is not going to start yawning. You don't have to worry about that. If you were going to competition, the last thing you would think about would be yawning or relaxing. But he's on a walk, and it shows about how big that mouth is. Okay, and then the next picture. Well, this is a very old picture, typical trail ride on the beach. Everybody likes to go to the beach, so we get all the horses on the truck. And in this instance, I remember being so scared because they were driving so fast. I was worried about the horses in the trailer. Well, there they are. So the first horse on the right, you can see the head sticking out. The reason that that head is sticking out is because the horse is uncomfortable. Now, I don't know what kind of a bit that horse had in his mouth, but there was a bit. Also, the rider has horrible form. The rider is too heavy for that horse. And you can look at that horse and you can see the strain on that horse. Very typical. Okay, and then the next picture. The horse in the background, and again, this isn't the best picture, but you can probably see how natural does that head look. You've got the rider sitting there. The head is bent in so far that the horse is struggling. He's not happy, but she's in control, and she has that bit in his mouth, and he's not going anywhere. And let's face it, it's scary. You get on a horse, you're going to fall off at some point, probably. And so if you don't want to fall off, that's what I always say. If you don't want to fall off, don't ride. You can have lots of different kinds of relationships with horses. They can teach you a lot. You can ride bareback. You can do all kinds of other things. But you have to not be afraid. If you're afraid and you're going to force that horse or hurt that horse in order to compensate for your fear, it's not okay. All right, and then the next picture. Now, there you go. These horses don't look like they're in any pain. They look very free. The white horse has Dr. Cook's bitless bridle. And I think the little horse may have a rope halter, and that is me in the picture. I have become a very good rider from starting in 1997 and being completely fearful, so fearful that my feet would shake in the stirrups. And I don't like speed, I don't like heights, and I really don't like to fall off. So I started riding when I was 40. That's the prime age of being really surrounded by all your fears. But I got through all of that, but the only reason that I did is because I had the tenacity to try and find something better for my horse so I wouldn't continue to hurt him. And now this is what you call ponying. I ride with one hand on my horse, and then the other hand is free to pony my other horse. So if I can do it, anybody can. But you have to make the investment in the future of your horse. I never bought and sold my horses. I kept them. And this isn't me saying it. There's somebody that I know very well. The safest horse is the one you kept. Okay, next picture. Okay, there you see it. The horse isn't breathing through his mouth. He's struggling, and it's very, very sad to see this. At many horse shows that I went, that's what I would see. I stopped going to horse shows because it was just very difficult to see horses struggling. Next picture. Is there a picture after this? Okay, we're not sure if there's a picture after this, so we'll see if we can get back to it. But the last thing that I want to do then is talk about the bitless options. There are many bitless options. And it's like I said, it's like saying horse therapy, there's only one horse therapy, and that's therapeutic riding. That's absolutely wrong. There is horse therapy, the kind of horse therapy we do to help people understand horses, be around them freely, and get that calm energy from them that then calms you. And that stays with you for a long period of time. So bitless, we have what we call, and I don't have a bosal, and I hope to have one for the next show, so you can see what a bosal looks like. But a bosal basically fits around the horse's nose. And all of you know what the horse, we'll use my illustration here with Fritz. That's the horse's nose. But the bosal is so hard. It's harder than rope. It can be made out of wood. It can be made out of cane. And that conforms to the horse's nose. And remember, the nasal passages are in there. Oh, one more picture I want to talk about this. This is the inside of the horse's mouth. You have the hard palate. You see the ridges from the teeth there that obviously have been floated. The hard palate, and then there's the cheek and the tongue below. That's what the bit affects. Just like our mouths, no different. So now on to the bitless options. We have the Bosal. It's very Western. It's a very cool thing to do for some people. And again, we have to try to get over this cute and cool and pretty, and we want it because it looks nice. We have to do what works and what's right. But the Bosals are made out of very, very hard materials for a reason. But again, remember that the nasal cavity is right here where the horse's nose is. So that we say that the bit interferes with the tongue and the corners of the mouth, the palate, but what about the breathing apparatus? Can we say for a fact that it doesn't do something with that? What I wanted to introduce was Dr. Cook's Bitless Bridle. It's a cross under. I'm used to saying Dr. Cook's Bitless Bridle. There are other companies now that make bitless bridles because they have become popular. There seems to be a new breed almost of horse people. They're really looking for something that isn't going to hurt their horse when they know that they're not able to have those incredibly soft hands. And this is Dr. Cook's Bitless Bridle. I'm going to talk on the next show. I'm going to show you how it works, what the cross under straps, why they are so important. And you know, who else to invent a bitless bridle than a veterinarian? Dr. Cook, I'm going to read his credits. He has a very prestigious title. He has an incredible background, an incredible education. He's a fellow of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. And he's a professor of surgery emeritus at Tufts University in Massachusetts, Cummins School of Veterinary Medicine. So you can't get any better than that, a veterinarian that actually advocates for the horse's well-being and cares about how they feel when they're being ridden. And Dr. Cook was an equestrian himself. He has ridden, so he understands what we're doing. Dr. Cook has also, I want to show a book that he's written. He's written two. One is called Metal in the Mouth. His site is going to be on www.bitless.com, and if you find all the categories, you need to find the category that says Robert Cook Official Site. And it'll give you all the information. You can call, they'll talk to you, they'll give you information. As far as the other companies that have bitless bridles, I think bitless is better than bitted. That is my opinion, and I'm one of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that were looking for a better way and didn't want to hurt their horse. So the book is titled Metal in the Mouth. There are also a lot of bad things that happen when you put metals in the mouth because they do leach. All of these things are very important. As far as the bitless, I want to make sure that you know there are a variety of bitless bridles, not only the bitless, like Dr. Cook's bitless bridle, the cross under, but there are Bosals, there's hackamores, there's the Western side pull, and there's also a rope halter, which I did bring, and I have used it in the past, but again, with hands that are inexperienced or hands that should not be messing around with a horse's mouth. These knots here are there for a reason, because they put pressure or pain on the sides of the horse's head, about where our temples are. And they also put pressure on the top of the head and a couple of other places in order for them to work effectively. So you put this in a child's hands, you put it in the hands of somebody that, doesn't understand how gentle they have to be. It's really bad for the horse. And a lot of one of the things that I have in common with Arno Hendricks is that I came from the same type of school that he did, where you were taught that if you didn't pull the bit, you needed to yank on the bit. So you needed to literally take those reins and pull as hard as you could to make that horse stop. That didn't work. Take one end and pull this way, or that end and pull that way. What are you doing with a horse? No wonder they're trying to run away. And same with other forms of, violence in a way. If the horse didn't respond to your legs, then kick them. And if that doesn't work, take a whip and whip them. Or take, a crop, which are meant to show direction, and hit that horse so that the horse does what you want the horse to do. So when we come back next time, we're going to have part 2. I'm going to go over this a little bit more, bring some more bitless bridles in, like the Bosal and the Hackamore, so people can see what they look like. Bring some more bits so that you can see what they look like, and hopefully you get an understanding of what this is all about. So, happy Valentine's Day to everybody. I hope you're getting through the winter. And don't forget to like Blixx Horses on Facebook. And this is Gabriela Rodriguez, reminding you to enjoy your horse, care for your horse, and keep your horse. See you next time.